Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Eileen. It is my great privilege this evening to introduce the um, this year's new president of the Religious Education Association, Reverend Dr. Karen Marie Eust. Dr. Karen Marie Eust is the Josiah P. and Ann Wilson Rowe Professor of Christian Education at Union Presbyterian Seminary. She directs the Children's Spirituality Research and Innovation Hub and has written extensively about children's religious formation, family spiritual practices, digital culture and faith, and Christian religious leadership. She is also ordained with ministerial standing in the UCC and Disciples of Christ traditions. Karen Marie, illuminate us.
Thanks, Eileen. So I'm excited to be able to talk about a project that I'm actually working on, and I am going to share screen here because I know that we've had many sessions over these 4 days. And so if you're like me, you're intellectually invigorated, but physically exhausted, and having some visual cues can be useful in that state. So I'm going to get us going here. Somebody give me a thumbs up. Let me know that you can see the presentation. Excellent. So I am actually working on a project for an international edited volume on children's spirituality and education. And I was asked 4 or 5 months ago if I'd write a chapter on digital culture, artificial intelligence, and children. And I was like, well, that's what the Religious Education Association is also talking about this year, at least the AI piece of that. And so this seems like a really good thing to do. So what I'd like to share with you tonight is a paper I've written that I'm continuing to build on because I continue to find new pieces of research that I want to incorporate into this that will get us sort of thinking a bit more deeply about children, digital culture, artificial intelligence, and children's spirituality. So let's think together here. Digital culture and artificial intelligence are ubiquitous parts of contemporary childhood. Whether engaged directly through the use of digital assistants, gaming platforms, shopping sites, and tutoring apps, or indirectly through the use of effects of online activities on parents, caregivers, and policymakers, the digital world is thoroughly entangled with the physical world of children. Websites capture personal IP addresses and track searches, which may be useful on some sites, for example, for school or work-related activities, library checkouts, favorite shopping venues, service providers, medical providers, and also less desirable on other sites, particularly shopping venues in general that then continue to send inducements to buy. Social media companies create marketing algorithms to decide which products and posts to highlight in users' feeds alongside the desired posts from friends and acquaintances. Uploaded photos and other personal data are scrutinized, stored, and sold. Some of these activities are transparent and include opt-out options, or users judge that the data collection appropriately supports their online engagement roles. But others are surreptitious and open the door for marketing campaigns, or for financial scams, or for phishing activities that can harm children and families. Internet Matters, a UK organization that tracks the internet usage and digital well-being of children ages 9 to 16 years, reports that approximately 3/4 or 77% of children experience the internet as a safe place to explore and connect. And that's a 2025 figure. Kids and their parents continue to see digital culture as more positive than negative as a force in children's development. And they see it as a tool that supports children as they make connections with others and learn new skills. Millennial parents of Gen Alpha children appreciate how AI facilitates learning and encourage their kids to play with AI driven toys and apps that support language learning and number sense. Scholars even laud the ability of AI driven educational tools to personalize learning, which educators believe enhances engagement and retention. At the same time, both children and adults worry about potential negative effects of digital participation. Children, particularly those who are vulnerable because of special needs, report having more problematic experiences because of poor time management online and negative reactions by others to their social media posts. Parents wonder if their children are getting enough physical exercise. And religious leaders fear that AI may undermine human dignity and erode children's sense of responsibility for making good moral decisions if they think a computer might make such judgments for them. The digital world is expansive, encompassing a variety of tools and environments. And as I talk about some of them, I invite you to drop other digital tools, AI encounters in the chat to add to this list. While social media and online gaming are perhaps the most studied with regard to children, they are only two aspects among many possibilities for digital engagement. Email provides access to digitally prepared school and personal communications, as well as marketing messages. Mobile apps deliver arcade-like games, calendar reminders, streaming content, photo galleries, fast food discounts, sleep feedback, and event tickets. Some apps, like Cornell's Merlin app or PlantNet or Google Lens, use image and sound databases to identify birds, plants, and other items. And I love my Merlin app. Smart doorbells, outlets, bulbs, cameras, and motion detectors allow kids and adults to monitor, access, and manage their homes. Robot vacuums help children keep their rooms clean. And mobile alerts remind them to walk the dog or pick up a sibling from an after-school activity. They can manage tasks via an online organizer. And parents and caregivers can monitor when children enter and leave home or ping their child's location elsewhere. Children can stay in touch with friends and family via text messages and various apps that allow them to chat, either wherever they are or while they're gaming. Online spaces also encourage content creation. Young people design and post TikTok videos and code plugins for their favorite massively multiplayer online role-playing games, such as World of Warcraft, and Guild Wars. Artists and crafters can sell their creations on Etsy and other online sites. Children contribute to the production of social knowledge through highlighting, manipulating, categorizing, and sharing information online in multiple formats, such as videos, links, images, and text. They create and disseminate memes that poke fun and satirize contemporary beliefs and practices. Some children even function as digital influencers, earning thousands and potentially, in a few cases, even millions of dollars in products and sponsorships. Toy unboxing, in which children open, play with, and rate new toys, has become a major source of revenue on YouTube. Parents and caregivers report witnessing children pretend playing as influencers and worry about their safety and potential exploitation online, even as many parents endorse influencing as, quote, a good career move from a 2024 study. A survey conducted by Harris Poll Lego found that almost 1 in 3 children between the ages of 8 and 12 want to become famous on YouTube. And a more recent survey by computer software company Adobe reveals that more than 1 in 4 parents would support the goal of their child becoming famous on YouTube. As influencers, children are much sought after value creators who can set trends and make a lot of money for companies whose products they endorse. Generative AI builds on young people's interest in creating content, as well as on their need to accomplish tasks like schoolwork that are assessed by others. Its focus is on using a compilation of source material like text, audio files, and images to create something unique. It is different from predictive AI, which gathers data like purchasing, weather, or stock activity, and then predicts likely interests and trends. It's also somewhat distinct from conversational AI, like that we have with Alexa, Siri, and Google Assistants. Although a platform like ChatGPT combines conversational and generative AI functions. And it differs from but builds on language learning models, also known as large language models, that analyze large data sets and then use that knowledge to translate or transcribe material, recognize and emulate speech patterns, and propose responses to queries. Let me turn to a few of what I see and some others see as positive spiritual aspects of digital culture and AI for kids. Despite some ambivalence about digital culture in general and AI more specifically, parents and caregivers generally recognize that both are staples of childhood that need to be managed just like other aspects of daily life. Teachers, too, acknowledge that there are benefits as well as risks in using online activities as part of a child's child's education. Even religious leaders have begun to discuss the benefits of online experiences for religious formation, hastened, of course, by the pandemic closures and need to go online for that period of time in many locations. What follows are some concrete examples of how families, schools, and congregations might imagine and employ AI and other digital tools in spiritually healthy ways. In other words, ways that promote relationality, positive self-image, imagination, creativity, positive social values, and ethical decision-making. One of those areas is related to how parents and caregivers typically welcome character teaching when it aligns with family perspectives and behavioral goals. Thomas the Tank Engine was a fixture in my children's childhood, alongside Oscar the Grouch, Arthur, an animated aardvark, and Madeline, a red-headed French school child. Each of these characters taught my kids life lessons. And these characters function much like AI characters do today, building relationships through media to influence young people's perspectives and behaviors. They encourage children to emulate characters that model attitudes and actions valued by their social community and/or spiritual tradition. They may even prompt children to question an AI to learn more about social expectations and activities. If a child asks Alexa, Amazon's AI, how to make more friends, Alexa searches for a website that addresses that question and shares what it finds. Here's what she, Alexa, had to say when I did this very query a couple of days ago. Quote, "The best way to make a friend is to be genuinely curious about others, listen attentively, follow up promptly when you connect with someone, take initiative in suggesting specific activities, and be reliable." The AI is paraphrasing a blog post authored by Madison, no last name, titled "How to Make Friends Who Truly Get You." Its intended audience is actually young adults, yet the principles of friendship shared reflect socially proved values for pretty much all ages. To encourage children to build on useful AI generated information, like that supplied by Alexa, an adult might help children come up with concrete ways to employ Alexa's advice. For example, children can identify questions they might ask to learn more about a playmate. They can practice listening skills, such as reflecting what someone says back to them to signal that they're paying attention and to check their understanding. AI thus serves as a tool alongside parents and caregivers to teach social norms and provide support as children live into these norms. Parents and caregivers can also suggest that children question the validity of AI generated information by checking sources and comparing the material with family, community, and religious messaging. They might help kids develop a habit of asking, "Where did this come from? And how does it compare with what I'm hearing elsewhere?" These are basic media literacy skills questions that need to become reflexive in children's lives. They orient children to the data mining approach of AI, and they highlight the limits of AI's ability to assess and categorize information in terms of value systems. AI and digital culture more generally also provide ample opportunities for children to explore diverse ideas and contexts. A child who is curious about how their peers in Ukraine are navigating life during wartime might ask a generative AI tool such as ChatGPT, "What is life like for children in Ukraine?" and instantly receive a several hundred word response highlighting how the war affects Ukrainian children's sense of safety, education, health, relationships, everyday activities, resilience, and hope. And again, I asked that query, and this is what I got. The text is accompanied by a qualifier reminding users that, quote, "ChatGPT can make mistakes. Check important info," end quote. Researchers at the Center for Digital Thriving say that many teens already recognize the need to verify AI generated information. Almost half of the 70% of teens who use generative AI, or at least are willing to admit they use generative AI, report that they double check before using AI sourced material. However, this carefulness is more prevalent among older teens, suggesting that elementary and middle school children are less aware of AI's propensity for misquoting facts and even what some call hallucinating, which is making up supposedly direct quotations that don't exist. So younger children are less aware then of how AI needs to be checked. They may need reminders from adults to verify information along with media literacy skill building opportunities. Smart toys are commonly designed to encourage imaginative and interactive play, much like earlier toys with pre-recorded voice boxes and simple robotic routines. A mobile or tablet app provides the interface a child uses to interact with the toy. And kids often attribute emotions and personalities to such smart toys. Studies show that smart toys can influence children's behavior by encouraging their curiosity, promoting a growth mindset, and sometimes, for good or ill, even persuading children to question social conventions and moral principles for themselves. However, smart toys are far less likely than an adult confederate to convince children to disobey an instruction from another adult, an outcome that was somewhat surprising to various researchers who have tried it. These researchers speculate that children actually assume adults are more aware of the rules and when the rules can be broken. So it's okay if an adult tells you you can break the rule. But children may wonder if a smart toy actually knows the proper way to behave and therefore are less likely to respond positively to a suggestion from the toy that they break a rule. They aren't sure if a smart toy can be trusted, whereas they're more inclined to trust an adult, even an adult they don't know. This reasoning suggests that kids need some assistance with identifying the limits of a smart toy's capabilities. They're not sure it can be trusted, but they also wonder if it could, and they need an adult to help them understand where the smart toy's ideas are coming from. The reasoning also suggests that parents and caregivers may want to take smart toys on a test drive to see whether their ways of interacting with children actually correspond with the kinds of social and relational values that matter to that particular family and community. In some ways, smart toys may function as a habituating tool for AI, as children may develop a sense of closeness and camaraderie with toys that are also social companions. Kids become comfortable in their interactions and might grow to trust the smart toy's pronouncements and advice because of the relational connection they build with the toy over time. While similar to how a child engages a non-smart, lovey, or stuffed companion, there is a significant difference between child-toy interactions that are driven by predictive or generative AI and those created and projected by the child onto the toy during imaginative play. The former is constructed from a much broader set of data about social ideas and conventions than the latter would be, which is fairly reflective of the child's particular environmental influences. This broader data set can be helpful, as the toy may provide a window into worlds beyond the child's experience. And it can also be potentially problematic if the values and assumptions driving the interactions are primarily market-driven or express unhealthy cultural biases. And that leads me to some of the problematic spiritual aspects of digital culture and AI. And again, neither of these are a full accounting of the possibilities or the problems. One of the most insidious and worrisome aspects of digital culture and AI is disinformation. The Center for Countering Digital Hate conducted a study of a major AI tool to determine whether queries would return false claims and or hateful content on topics such as gender identity, racism, sexism, climate change, and anti-Semitism. They found that 3/4 of the time, or 78 out of 100 cases, the AI's response included some material without critical context or analysis that might be seen as false or hateful. This was especially true with more complex questions, leading the researchers to think that the simple rules, the obviously hateful or the obviously false, was caught through the various rules and algorithms, but more nuanced problematic material was not. UNICEF speculates that children may be more susceptible to misinformation, particularly if they spend a lot of time online. AI-generated misinformation becomes a part of the data set that kids use to make sense of the world around them, competing for validity among other information received from personal experience, peers, and a variety of trusted and other adults. And here Paul Harris's work on trusting what you're told might give us a sense of how that competitive process shakes out. With current algorithmic biases towards sensationalized content and bias confirmation meant to drive clicks, children are less likely to encounter diverse critical perspectives online and more likely to see and hear narratives curated to encourage conformative to predetermined public or marketing agendas. It's crucial, therefore, that parents, caregivers, educators, and religious leaders provide children with opportunities to develop strong media literacy skills and that they encourage kids to use those skills regularly while online. AI chatbots and virtual assistants also add the element of interacting with an other who seems human-like and uses human-like language and voice to communicate, which might lead children to believe that the AI chatbot or assistant is attuned to their particular needs and interests. Children engage in a dialogical encounter that mimics some aspects of interpersonal conversation. These dialogue agents, as some media studies researchers call them, provide information and a sense of social connection. They may gain formative power because they so closely replicate human to human interactions, as in the similar dynamic between a child and a beloved character, stuffed animal, or doll. Yet chatbots and virtual assistants are not adept at reading social emotional cues, nor are they able to assess mental well-being with any reliability. And this can lead to misunderstood queries and inappropriate responses. A virtual assistant or chatbot may not recognize that a child is feeling worried, sad, or fearful. And they're also unlikely to address directly emotional distress when they're framing their query answers. Kids may find this disconnect confusing because of the otherwise human-like qualities of the interaction, which could then lead to further anxiety and upset. A hidden or indirect risk of AI for children is the way in which predictive analytics programs systematically reinforce social biases and profiling in making decisions about who has access to healthcare, social services, property ownership, and a host of other things. When families are denied services and even basic rights because of presumptive categories of race, class, immigration status, or gender identity, children suffer even if they're unaware of the harm. UNICEF's policy guidelines for AI note that, quote, training machine learning systems on past data and on data that has not been collected for the specific case can reinforce, if not amplify, historic patterns of systematic bias and discrimination, end quote. This problem is being compounded daily as AI systems hungrily gobble up data without regard for its veracity or commitment to equitable representation. Similarly, when children interact with biased information generated by AI, their sense of self is affected. Those whom societies marginalize see and hear their marginalized status reinforced by query answers that claim to be factual. They may experience subtle and not so subtle pressure to see themselves as belonging within and limited by stereotyped categories. This is compounded by the practice of algorithmic profiling, wherein children's personal data, search histories, gaming activities, and purchases, their own or those made by parental proxy, place them into predetermined profiles that then systematically limit the information offered to them. Quote, ultimately, when children grow up under constant profiling and surveillance, and their agency and autonomy are constrained by AI systems, their well-being and potential to fully develop will be limited, end quote. And also from the UNICEF policy guidelines. A final thought. I am continuing to review research and develop my thinking about the relationship between digital culture, AI, and children's spiritual well-being. Last week, on July 2nd to be precise, a new study appeared in the journal Science Advances that reminded me once again that kids are way more capable than we typically realize. Researchers at Temple University compared the speed with which preschool children could recognize visual objects with that of several deep neural network computational models trained to visually inspect and identify objects. In almost every case, the kids won. So, to the question of who is smarter, the computer or the child, when it comes to visual object recognition, it's the kindergartner, leading Temple professor Vlad Azenberg to observe that computer scientists might want to use insights from children's cognitive and neural behavior to improve the functionality and speed of AI visual recognition models. So let me conclude with a quotation from Isaiah, "And a little child shall lead them, even when it comes to AI." And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and invite your comments, questions, concerns, whatever it is you'd like to discuss in relation to this, this work.
So Cameron, well, we'll start by recognizing Vaughn because he's got his hand up. Or no, was that applause? Applause. I thought we might start with a couple of things that came up in the chat and see if you want to comment. Paul Van Straten notes that some other uses of AI, accessibility, video access through AI with smart glasses help people who are blind. For example, this provides audio descriptions of what they're looking at. And an example is another example is that a person with autism, as a person with autism, Paul uses AI to interpret messages from others on politically sensitive matters.
Yes. Yeah, in fact, I was listening in on the plenary earlier today and made a point of saving the chat because I thought, oh, here's a whole nother arena I want to pull into this. So thank you for that.
Lisa Kimball's note is because you would ask people to put in what are other, so what are some other activities. Lisa notes real-time multilingual translation, facial recognition, and other personal monitoring uses.
Yes. Yes.
And then Dean Blevins notes that 3D printers anchor many makerspace locations and libraries.
Yeah. And a good example too of offline online connectivity, because maker spaces are physical spaces that are also using digital tools to get that interaction between the two. We have one. We have a maker space at UP Sim Library.
Dean, some more thoughts.
Just to build on that, and I think, Emery, I think what you did is a great presentation. But I do think a makerspace is always interesting because, as you said, it's it's both online, offline, but it's also the hybridization of so many different types of technology, from knitting and sewing machines up to more advanced work. And I've often thought that that's as maker fairs are understood, that's where both engineers and artists come together. So it's a different kind of way of thinking about space that children inhabit that need not be fully one form of technology or the other, but actually works on a continuum kind of thing. So enough said.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some of the issues that you found especially either hopeful or horrifying in Karen Marie's talk? Or new? I mean, some of these things may be new to you.
I'll jump in. Thank you, Karen Marie. It was wonderful. And it was expansive in the way that helped me think about things I've been thinking about in a structured way. I think the question of trust is a huge one that is so socially and culturally located. So I was intrigued by that comment that you said at one point, that children are inclined to trust humans or people more than their AI generated partner communicator. That, of course, wouldn't be true in certain environments, right, where adults have not been reliable and trustable. And so that whole question, it's sort of these antecedent questions about how we are nurturing children even as they approach digital technologies, right? So it for me, I haven't had the high levels of anxiety about engagement with technology if I know the community, the household, the parenting, the has the capacity to journey with. Same way we used to do with television with kids and kids who got locked in on Saturday morning cartoons and wouldn't go outside and play. And, I mean, generationally, there have been ways in which we've needed to relate to young people on their terms to invite them to imagine a different way forward, right? So that trust thing, I think, is really important. I'd love to hear you say more about it if you'd like. You mentioned Paul,
Yeah.
but I didn't know if there were other things you're referring to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let me say a little bit more about Paul Harris too. And I've done some writing on it before, but Harris actually sort of sketches out the whole host of different aspects of trust building that are involved in children deciding who to trust. And while children often give close adults the benefit of the doubt initially, it doesn't take very long before how often they've actually been right starts to matter. And the way in which they convey the information starts to matter. And so, so one of the things I'd like to play with along the way, but haven't, and I haven't seen any research doing this yet either, is in what ways are trusting relationships being nurtured, fostered through these various AI assistants, media characters, all that. In what ways are they using that knowledge about those kinds of research to build trusting relationships? And will that end up, as you noted, especially for children who don't have well-attached, trusting relationships with adults in their lives, will that begin to skew their reliance on these companionable AI figures as more trustworthy? And then how that could be manipulated and used, as well as how it can be positive. We tend not to worry too much if a character is in PBS land, but worry about it more if it's a site that's unfamiliar, or if it comes from a school system. And yet so many of our school system technology is funded by and used as a marketing conduit for various companies. And it's become somewhat accepted, particularly in public schools, that that's the reality of having access. So what will that mean? But it's also intriguing to me that, at least in the study I was looking at, the adult confederate was just an adult conducting the study. The children didn't know the adult. So there was still this sense that persons that the child clearly recognized as human know more about human interactions and human rules. That at least they're giving that sort of benefit of the doubt. And reading some of the vignettes, it was a character, part of the study was a character trying to get a child to eat a piece of candy that they'd been told to wait until an adult came back, and there was a 5-minute period, and once a minute the toy would try to get the child to eat the candy. And the vast majority of children resisted the toy. Sometimes they even explained to the toy why they couldn't. So there's a whole dynamic going on there. But interestingly, social conventions were stronger resistors than moral decisions. Like the fact that so it showed children's moral ambiguity at a young age, because we're talking younger kids here. They did 3 to 9. So again, there's just a lot we don't know, because a lot of this work is 23, 24, 25. So we just need to find out more. But I think all these different ways that kids figure out who to trust or what to trust is going to be key to some of that.
Thank you. Russell's had his hand up for a minute.
Yes, thanks. I just I appreciated Lisa's comment and your response, Karen Marie, and appreciate this so much. You know, we live in a culture, perhaps a digital culture enhances this, that it's binaries, right? Either or. And so I appreciate you talking about, you know, the advantages, the disadvantages, uh, and also in talking about children. You know, children are not, and you alluded to this, are not homogeneous, right? They're not all the same. Just like adult learners, they're not all the same. You know, we have a saying, if you know one person on the autism spectrum, you know one person on the autism spectrum. And that's what I was thinking because I've uh, known children, you know, both ways on the autism spectrum who some might trust, you know, AI or something they read online more than adults. But you know, I'm glad to hear that trend. So I just was going to bring that up that it just calls for us as educators, even with adults. I hesitate to take the focus away from children because we need the focus on children. But even with my students now, you know, master students, 22, 23-year-old, I could make connections to some of the research that you were talking about. It'd be interesting to do that with adults as well. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, and I do think it's important. I mean, in this kind of brief paper presentation, I mentioned the greater vulnerability of persons, you know, children who are already marginalized and stereotyped, and those who have a host of different kinds of special needs. And it's easy to generalize and forget that
Right.
for some children, these interactions are already happening in a context where they have heightened vulnerability. And so the ways in which what might seem relatively mildly persuasive or mildly problematic for one child can be that sort of tipping point into negative self-image or limiting in terms of their sense of welcome and belonging in a space. In the same way that if two children walk into a maker's lab and one is welcomed and encouraged to use things and the other's kind of shunted over to the side, they get the message this is not for them. And both they may be less than vulnerable to the problematic aspects, but they lose out on all of the positive aspects at the same time. So, and I'm not, again, this is in some ways a heightening of the very dynamics we see in the offline world. So it's, you know, it's an issue that we've really got to address online and offline in some way. And I think Paul also points to the risk to adults, but that's would be similar for children who may not be able to distinguish. Fortunately, we know that by about 3 or 4, kids are actually pretty good at knowing what's real or not real, which is, I think, why even the young children could, you know, make that decision about not quite trusting the toy.
Thank you. Yeah. And even just, you know, the adult guidance so much, you know, watching Thomas the Tank Engine and then going and playing with them on the wooden train set and just talking and interacting about what they're seeing, right, with that media literacy at a young age. So thank you very much.
Dean, thoughts?
Yeah, very quickly, Karen Marie, one thing that you said that might just be a footnote, so I hope you hear from there is probably the trust is a framework for moral reasoning, what to trust, as opposed to an interpersonal relational component, who to trust. There might be work in the moral affections that might help come alongside what Paul Harris and others, in other words, and how to me they're interrelated. So, but at least I think you might find some work around how children's affections are shaped and formed that I think you probably are aware of. But I'm just aware when we get into the moral reasoning side, suddenly we're in a trajectory that, I mean, from Kohlberg and others, just tends to only focus on moral decision making. Well, not even that, moral relationships only in a particular way.
Mhm.
So, the other
Yeah.
thing, actually playful, and I don't know the answer to this because I was thinking about the communication AI more than anything else, and who's included and who's excluded. It'd be interesting to know how the voices are chosen to respond and how inclusive or non-inclusive. I've never played around, partially because I'm hard of hearing, with whether those voices can be randomized. So when you say, and I'm going to be careful, I'm on a Mac, so I'll just say, "Hey Alexa." If I say the other one, it'll respond. Whether I would get more than one voice, could a child actually experience a range of voices in response? So they might find their own inclusiveness. It's just a random thought to add in. So, but who gets left out? It's always a kind of question
Yeah.
mark in any technology.
Yeah, I love that because I know that one can get any number of sort of forms of accented English, but they tend to be, I would say, still pretty white in the way that they play out. And I don't know that there's a way to get it to move in and out of different voices. Because personally, I would love that. I default to a British tone because it sounds more like the butler kind of thing. And I'm always asking my IA to turn things on and off or find me things.
Yeah.
But I do think that we also know that there's a whole lot of, again, marketing research that goes into the quality of the voice, whether it's male or female, in traditional understandings, deeper, higher. That all has to do with how persuasive or trustworthy it's likely to be perceived by certain sets. So there's that hidden element there as well.
To me, it'd be an interesting pedagogical framework if you could randomize that. So it is a random thought. So I'll conclude with that.
Yeah. And I say, as Eric noted, most can change gender, accent, and language of the voice, but in my experience, they won't do it from time to time. Yeah. You have to change it, and then it'll do that for that period. But you could have them, if you have multiple in your house, you could have different ones on different ones. My TV just spoke to me.
Paul has his hand up. And he's had a couple of comments, but I'm going to invite him to.
Well, I was just thinking about a comment that I just posted. I posted it in response to what I said earlier about in response to your response on the adults trusting AI, and that is, I wonder what children have that gives them clarity that is inaccessible to many adults. I find it interesting that children can distinguish between AI-generated results and real images, as you were pointing out in the recent study. And many studies show the opposite result with adults. Like lots of studies at universities show that people can't distinguish between AI-generated images and real images. And so I have to wonder what it is about children that gives them such clarity. But like bringing that back into religion, there are multiple spiritualities around the world that value children for their insight into the spiritual and into the divine. And I'd have to wonder to myself, what is it that gives them this clarity that seems to be missing to adults? And it seems to me that we value as adults our ability to have logic and our ability to reason through things, and yet somehow or another, the children seem to have something to teach us that we seem to not be able to grasp.
There is it is very intriguing to me, the researchers that published the article that literally came out on July 2nd are interested in trying to study exactly what it might be that helps children to recognize an image faster than a computer tool can do so. But they don't, again, they're speculating. They don't know for sure what's going on there. But I suspect that, that will be next stages of the study. Yeah.
Thank you. Others? Thoughts, questions, horrors? Oh, Kimball, do you want to share that experiment?
Oh, sure. I'll just mention it. So, yeah, I got curious if it would be possible to randomize. So I popped up my phone and took a look, and it's a single choice. So you can shift, as Eric noted, you can shift accent, you can shift language. The choices that are available on Apple have a range of pitches, so they sound more or less male or female. And but there is no setting to randomize it. And in one of my lives, I worked in IT for almost a decade, and it strikes me that the setting software wise would, I think, be fairly straightforward. So it makes me wonder what design choices those that hardware software combo those teams are making so that that's not an option. So I don't know, maybe we just start a grassroots writing campaign, start sending them messages on a regular basis. Maybe that could be an option.
Yeah, perhaps we could build an app, Eric, for that, market it, and REA get some of the royalty out of it before.
There's an app for that.
There you go.
Well, listening to Tay talk about his AI-based coding that he's been doing, that could be something that you do in a sabbatical. Play around with that and figure out how to make that app.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, I mean, anecdotally, my eldest daughter, who's transgender, is a director at Google. She mostly works in back-end privacy kinds of stuff. But there is a group of folks there who are trying to figure out how to address any number of issues related to making Google more hospitable to gender, gender fluid identities and those sorts of things, out of self-interest as well as moral commitment. That's not to say that it will happen rapidly or quickly, but there are even those in the industry working inside, trying to figure out ways to address the binaries and biases that are there.
Thank you, Karen Marie, for sharing all of that. And I invite everyone to honor Karen Marie with reaction or an applause or whatever works for your system. We're going to end a couple of minutes early. We're going to take 5 before the closing ritual, just as a if you need a bio break, stand up, move your shoulders. It's getting late. We've been at this for days. And so if you come back at 2 minutes past the hour, we will dive into the closing ritual.